We're continuing Punjabi history in Terrace BC, so we have our second contestant. What is your name and when or how did you come to Terrace BC?
My name is Kamaljit Kaur
Yeah.
My maiden name was Buttar.
Okay.
I actually came from India when I was only 2 years old.
Okay.
So back in 75 is when we arrived from India.
Oh, nice. And you were mentioning prior that you said that you had a family member that was here in Rupert much longer ago. Could you go into detail with that?
Yeah, no, my father actually arrived, had an opportunity to come to Canada through the railway system. He was an engineer back in India. So he did quite a bit of the railway system, and they were looking for trained, qualified engineers in Canada. He looked at it as an opportunity to come in, broaden his horizons, to see different parts of the world.
Yeah.
So he had the opportunity to come to Prince Rupert and work there. And that was in the mid-60s.
Mid-60s.
Is when he arrived, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear. And when you were here in Terrace BC, could you describe how many other Punjabi people were there at the moment, and if you had any relatives as well living at that time?
In Terrace, I grew up with my bibi
Okay.
and my mommy, and there was quite a bit of Indian families in town.
Yeah.
Many of them, of course, worked at the local mills.
Yes.
There was 2 mills.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of skilled labor work there, and a lot of East Indian families. We would go to the Gurdwara. It was very community oriented. After the Gurdwara, we would all go and gather at people's, everybody's different homes every Sunday, and just continue on and just talk about our week. Have all of us kids, we were always engaged within our culture, and it was very family oriented, because a lot of people didn't have a lot of their family members here, so we created our own family amongst one another.
That's beautiful to hear, actually. Yeah. And could you describe if there were any obstacles, hardships, or struggles as a whole while coming here to Canada?
I think a lot of it is, I'll have to say, like when I did, I talked to my father about when he first came, what did he experience and all of that. Even though he was very highly qualified, he still was different than others. Right? It's, there wasn't a lot of diversity. Even Prince Rupert being a port community, there was a lot of different cultures, but not everyone knew how to take one another. So they were learning how to figure out one another's cultures. So it was a bit of, it was a learning curve for many people.
Okay.
But what he found to be is he always came with an open mind.
Yeah.
So he was always fascinated by the world, different people's cultures. So he embraced it, even though he had a bit of pushback.
Yeah.
He would not take that as a no. He'd always want to be learning.
You'd find a way around it.
You always find a way around it, and that is something that he passed on to us children. Is, if you don't know something and you're curious, you just have to ask.
Just ask,
yeah.
And because for you, your example, I know you mentioned you were born in India.
Yeah.
You came here while you were 2, but again, you were raised here. You're pretty much a Canadian, right? You were raised in this culture and everything, right? And there's a lot of youngsters now. There's, of course, not as much as when I was growing up either.
Right.
Like, there's fewer kids, but especially if this international students coming in, they'll have kids and stuff. So possibly in the future, we'll see more in the schools. But while you were going to school, and there was other, of course, Apne kids going with you, and Punjabi kids too. Being one of the first kids of color going to school, was there any hardships that you may have faced during that time?
It's strange that you say that, because I've recently reflected a lot on that. Because while growing up, I just thought kids teased kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There was always something that you tease one another for.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize, but a lot of it was due to my color. Right? And I'm just thinking, well, I guess that is racially profiling, but we never labeled it as that.
Yeah.
I think now we've come to realize, oh, that is wrong.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be doing that. But growing up, I'll be quite honest, I didn't ever feel like I ever had any backlash from anyone, but I also was the type of personality that never took anything to heart.
No.
And I would also just be that curious mind and wanting to know.
Yeah.
And I would just go and befriend whoever it was and say, you know what, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Pretty much just cut that barrier right
just
there.
Just cut the barrier
yeah.
right away. And that's how we were raised, and that's how we were told. My grandmother, I believe, was well ahead of her times.
Yeah.
That way. And she'd always say, you know what, if you want to know something, go and find out.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us know that. And although your family may have went through struggles and they came
yes.
and they even made it through this way, what are you most proud of, like your accomplishments, or even in your family as a whole? Like, what are you most proud of being one of the first people that were raised, like one of the first people that were raised here? Even your father was one of the first Punjabi people to come to this area. Like, what are you proud of? Explain.
You know what I'm proud of, I have to say, is the family values that we always had. Even though coming to a new country,
yes,
and looking at it as, okay, this is, like we had a great life back in India. So it's not as though it wasn't a good life. It was more or less within our culture, it was this way where, women didn't have the same opportunities.
Yeah.
It was just expected of them and customary at that time that, yes, you can graduate, but there was really no higher education. It wasn't encouraged, we'll say.
Yeah.
However, within our family, it was very different. My grandmother was not allowed to, go and get a higher education.
Yeah.
So she always had that within her heart, and she always wanted to make sure that we had that opportunity and just go make something for yourself. So I have to say that was probably the biggest thing, is through education, you end up opening up your mind to other opportunities. And she also taught us at a very young age, even though you live in Canada.
Yes.
And this is something I'd like to pass on to the future generation.
Yeah.
That's more born and raised here, because pretty much you can say I was.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have my BB and live with her.
Yes.
She taught us that no matter what, you're in Canada, you're going to an English-speaking school, you're going to learn English, you're going to know that way of life.
Yeah.
But what you need to preserve and hold on to is that culture. So what, at that time, even though I felt I didn't have my independence to choose, I'm glad she did do this, is we'd come home from school, we'd have to wear a Punjabi suit. And we were only allowed to speak Punjabi in the house. Oh. Once we left the house, we could speak English and all of that. But inside the house, only Punjabi was spoken. So that is, because of that, I think we never lost our roots.
And that's very, tends to be very common, is a lot of kids, they feel like because they're born here, they kind of have to have that to their side, or it's a little bit like they're not in a way embarrassed, but they don't feel like they can necessarily embrace it. But I definitely feel like I enjoy that you say that. It's good for the Canadian-born generation here, or even newcomers that come here, like recent immigrants, like students, that you don't necessarily have to lose your roots and culture, but you can still be Canadian at the same thing.
Absolutely.
So I'm very happy that you pointed that out.
Yeah.
And then I believe you've already talked about, answered this question prior, but we'll just get, I'll ask this in a little bit of a different way. So the community life of other Punjabis and Sikhs or other Indians in general, what do you see as a difference on when you were growing up and now?
I think a lot of it is there's just so many different pressures coming from so many different sides.
Yeah.
And I really respect a lot of the international students that come to our community. I've learned about a bit of their stories, and what I wasn't aware of is, some of them work multiple jobs.
Yeah.
And I'm going, as a person, as an individual that was raised here,
Yeah.
I never had those struggles.
Yeah.
I didn't have to work multiple jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is to make ends meet and also send money back home.
Yes.
And I guess I lost that, and I never understood that piece. Yes, I've always worked hard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I also know that I didn't have to if I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So they do this out of necessity.
Yeah.
And it's, kudos to them. And I know that they're trying to adapt into a new life
Yes.
here. And my piece of advice for any newcomers or even our young Sikh children is, yes, immerse yourself within the community, learn about others,
Yes.
show some compassion, don't feel afraid of who you are because you're very unique. And if we all were the same,
Be boring.
it would be so boring.
Yeah.
So be your unique self and just be proud of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as we are talking, this project is about our history, for example, and our peoples here. But at the same time, we also want to know how each individual's relationship was with other communities. Can you express some connections and beautiful relationships with the other communities? And here's not even the Punjabis. Could you explain that?
Yeah. So I know growing up in Prince Rupert was a melting pot of all cultures.
Yeah.
It's a port community. At a very, very young age, I remember going to the multicultural dinners there.
Yes.
We had people, the Chinese community that would come in and do their cultural dance, a huge Filipino group, Italian, Portuguese, First Nations communities. It really opened up our eyes. But one thing I can say, and I really stress this, is we never realized we were any different.
Yeah.
We never labeled ourselves.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I find in today's generation is we like labels.
Yes.
And I think we're trying to be politically correct by putting these labels on everyone. And I think once we stop and really realize what we're doing, we're all humans.
Yes.
And why do we need labels put on ourselves? So that's one piece I can tell you. Growing up, we were always provided those opportunities. And then I just carried that through into my adult life. And even when I had my own children, it was something that was very important to me. I would always go to the multicultural potluck dinners. And I'd tell the kids that, look, it's like a social studies project. You're going to understand there's a lot of other people from different backgrounds that live just in our own area.
Yeah.
And then I would coach and I would integrate the athletes into giving back to the community. What better way to teach them about acceptance
Yes.
of going there? And I'm just continuing on with that with, a lot of my community work that I do. I think I was provided with so many opportunities that I owe, to basically pass that legacy on.
Definitely.
And we all need to do our small bit
Yeah.
at giving back, whatever that looks like.
Of course, because we're all part of this country at the end of the day, as Canadians.
At the end of the day, we are all Canadian.
Yeah.
We live in this beautiful country.
Yeah.
And we need to embrace it. We need to embrace one another.
Yes. And like you were saying, being politically correct, like having these labels and stuff. When we start to, I know it's like from your interview and stuff, it's clear that you say, yes, embrace your roots and stuff. But we can't be so fixated on that in a sense where that's all we identify with.
Yes.
Is that, and throughout, recently, within the last few years, unfortunately, that has been First Nations, white, South Asian, it's by doing so, having these labels and stuff, it's going to push us further away.
Absolutely.
In a sense. And it necessarily wasn't like that 10, 15 years ago, but it has been a little bit recently. But that's why we're here. That's why we're here with this project. And it's just to, this project itself is to motivate others to come forward and tell their stories, right?
Absolutely.
And so our next question is, this might be a little personal. So what keeps you around? Because I know you said a lot of your family members are gone and stuff.
Yeah.
The mill shut down. A lot of our community left. We had
Yeah.
a massive community. I don't even feel like, even if the international students and stuff that we have here, we have that big size of a community. Like even when I was growing up.
Yes.
So what still keeps you here? What still keeps you here?
You know what?
What do you like about here?
There's no better place. Like, I mean, I think when we look, it was a great place to raise my daughters.
Yeah.
I believe I was able to give them every opportunity we potentially could. We have the culture, we have the arts, we have beautiful nature,
Yes.
and we built our careers here. You know, we started off down here, and we know the concept of really hard work, grit, perseverance, and I like that I can walk down the street and I can talk to absolutely anyone.
Yeah.
I go to the city, no offense, but you're focused on the task at hand, and that's it.
Yeah.
I like it when I can just walk down the street and strike up a conversation, and someone's not gonna think I'm crazy or anything like that, right?
Like a big city.
It's just it's very community oriented.
Yes.
And that's what I love, and I don't ever want to lose that.
And you may have already answered this question here, but if you were to speak from your heart, what advice do you give to the future generations, like the ones that are born here, or even like the new international students who are coming here? From your heart, what would you like to say to them? Like, what advice would you like to pass on? Because at one point we're all going to be gone, and for me, myself, I was born here, but I'm still 25, so I'm still that next generation.
Yeah.
So what would you tell me? What would you tell to these, like, to us, like the ones that are even born here and they'll have kids? Like, what do you want to tell them? What do you want to leave here for them?
You
like,
know
so
what?
they can...
If I could leave a legacy,
Yeah.
the legacy would be that, learn how to not only love yourself
Yes.
within,
Yeah.
but also reach out.
Yeah.
There's so many people that are struggling
Yes.
in this world.
Yeah.
There's no stigmatism behind mental health. Everyone has different issues in life.
Absolutely.
Everyone has different struggles. But if we can just show an ounce of compassion to one another, I think this world would be such a better place. Before we start barking at someone, just take a step back and go, what is really going on within for me to want to react this way?
Yeah, that's very true. That's more like a spiritual sense of speaking, because whatever we feel inwardly is what we will express outwardly.
Absolutely.
It is. That's absolutely the fact. Yeah.
And you're gonna find if you exude negativity, only negativity is gonna come back.
Yeah.
And it's not hocus pocus. And I know I've always taught my athletes, my daughters, this is when you wake up every day, sometimes it's hard because we get into this world and negativity can eat us up alive.
Yeah.
Be grateful for, even start off with 3 things. List those 3 things that you're grateful for.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard initially if you're not accustomed to this, and then work yourself up because it's all mindset. And yeah, we all struggle.
Yes.
We all have had to struggle.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard, but don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah.
Someone's going to hold your hand.
Yeah.
And you just have to understand that sometimes you can't be strong all the time.
No.
And that's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay not to be strong all the time.
Yeah.
And it's okay to break down.
Yeah.
It's a normal human being reaction.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the biggest piece, is just be real to yourself and understand that yes, it might be a struggle right now, but if you just keep at it, just that little bit, but you know what, keep open. There's always opportunities all around, but you have to have an open mind for it, and that, I've been very fortunate in life that way, that I've always, kind of had these different opportunities, but it's also because you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
Out of your comfort zone. But with that, that's the only time you're going to find change and progress, is getting out of your comfort zone.
That's great to hear, and I think that kind of overall goes with my next question was, how do you see a change in Terrace? And that's almost what you would want to say for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
To make it a better place.
Just make it a better place. I know it's sometimes hard.
Yes.
And I get it.
Yeah.
But just even maybe, hey, this week, I'm going to make sure that I tell 3 people that, how are you today?
Yes.
Just make this a routine to do, and it's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It's such a ripple effect. I'm not saying I'm happy all the time, but I try to make myself be that way, because when I give off that energy, other people, even if they're in not the greatest mood, it diffuses that and brings them into a better state of mind. And if I can change that for even 1 or 2 people, that's an amazing thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
Is that to be able to change someone's mindset, sit and have intellectual conversation. It's priceless. It really is.
And was there anything else that you'd like to have out there? That was a great interview. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? And also, I had one more thing.
Yeah.
So, and that really does bridge the gap between many communities. I feel like once we've become more multicultural and even marriages amongst different races. You said your husband himself, he's a white man, and you have biracial kids.
Yeah.
Before you ended off there, did you want to talk anything regarding that?
I guess with that piece, it is something that is, growing up in Canada and being together with someone outside the race in the 90s was very taboo. It was looked as very taboo.
Okay.
Unfortunately, within my own community, it was looked down upon.
Mm-hmm.
I was segregated, and I wasn't accepted. The relationship was not accepted. We had children. Even with the girls growing up, they didn't know how to identify themselves because they weren't quite Indian enough.
Yeah.
But they weren't quite European enough.
So they were stuck in.
They felt like, okay, well, really, what am I?
Yeah.
And never gaining that acceptance. And I told them, I said, you know what? I said, you just have the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
You still are Indian, and you are still European.
Absolutely.
I said, you have to accept who you are as a human being. I would bring them to the Gurdwara still, even as youngsters.
Yes.
Just so that they would have that culture.
Have that connection.
Right, and have that connection. They're very spiritual people. They do not come to the Gurdwara or go to a church or any religious organization in any way, but that is their choice.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, I wanted them to be good human beings and to give back.
Yeah.
And within the culture, I don't want to be negative, but it was very hard because I felt so connected to the community.
Yes.
And then when this had happened, they just left me. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of hurt, but I had to get over it.
Yeah.
And I had to basically say, you know what? That doesn't define me. That doesn't mean that I still can't be with my God.
Yes.
So I got over it.
Yeah.
And that would probably actually be my biggest accomplishment, is still being married to this day. Having 2 amazingly talented young women that I know will make a difference in this world. And I think it is much different now and very much more accepting.
Yes.
But I think a lot of it is what you don't know. It's the fear of the unknown. And that's why I say, don't ever be afraid to ask.
Yes.
Right? And that's where I think that disconnect had happened initially, was the fear of the unknown. If we accept this, what's going to happen to our culture?
Yeah, they're afraid of the culture. So of course, with the prior experiences, it all stems with racism. Always stems from fear, and even with the racism that's currently going on with in our community of Terrace, it's mostly fear of the unknown, what we don't know.
That's all that it is.
That's all what it is.
Yeah.
And although it's much more accepting, it's very nice to see that, even though it was frowned upon from either side, that you and your husband were able to bridge that gap, be together, and show the world that even though it may have been a society that wasn't very accepting of mixed racial couples, he probably when you were living, it wasn't too common at that time.
It was not common at all.
Yeah.
So, and that's why a lot of it is where, okay, this cultured, Sikh woman, what happened that now she would think to look outside her own community, and it had nothing to do with that.
No, it was just the individual he was.
That's exactly it. And I really believe the love, the human being, it's common ground. There is no right or wrong that way.
Yeah.
There really isn't. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and that's how we should be looking at life. I am still a Sikh woman.
Yes.
And that is not changing. It doesn't matter who I'm married to. In any way, shape, or form, I'm still true to myself, and my God knows that I've always been true to that.
And there we have it, Cam Simons with us today, and thanks for having me today and expressing your story.